Hello, I really enjoy your tutorial videos. They've been very helpful to me. I just have a few questions I hope you can answer. Currently in Vietnam, jewelry designers often use Rhino and Matrix 3D to create 3D jewelry models, then export those files to 3D resin printers to produce physical pieces, which are then processed and finished into the final products for sale. I am hesitating between choosing Blender or Matrix Rhino for jewelry design. If I choose Blender, I could design more things beyond just jewelry, but I'm not sure if Blender can provide the proper technical specifications like the specialized jewelry design software does. Since accurate specs are important so that jewelers can set stones, polish, and so on. I would really appreciate it if you could help clarify this for me. Well, the first consideration is that Blender has all the technical tools required to 3D model, visualize, and manufacture jewelry. And also don't forget that Blender has many add-ons, some for free, some you can buy. So if a tool is missing, you can get an add-on, and even better, thanks to the fact that Blender is open source, you can program whatever tool you need, whatever is missing. Blender definitely has every tool you need, designing jewelry, making jewelry renders, animations, and manufacturing jewelry using 3D printing, and then make all the manufacturing processes to create the jewels and sell jewelry. And well, people don't label Blender as a specialized jewelry software, but that's because people like to label things, and because of these short-sighted labels, people keep missing a lot of great opportunities. Also remember that Blender is an open source and free software. You don't necessarily have to pay anything to use Blender, although you're very welcome to support the Blender Foundation. And you're also perfectly welcome to create a big jewelry manufacturing business around Blender. That's completely up to you. If you don't get rich, it won't be because of Blender. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the cost of the specialized jewelry industry softwares. So the range is pretty wide. Some softwares are cheaper than others. None of them are free. They all need some kind of license. Some have even very specialized anti-piracy hardware keys. That's a pretty common practice in the high-end cost for jewelry softwares. The range is around 2,000 US dollars up to $8,000. It's all depending some specific tools that you want to have in your license, also some type of services. And obviously nowadays, many softwares have a monthly or yearly rental option. That's pretty common given the trend of the software market. And that's the cost of the software. From there, don't forget that you need to buy a powerful computer. And if you're going to invest in a great software, you better invest in a great computer. And then also you'll have to learn the software. And that's another cost. So obviously all that money is an investment. You're investing money in your jewelry business, in your jewelry career, and the goal is to make a lot more money. Okay, so obviously these investments make a lot of sense. But don't forget, that's just the investment part. Because then, with all these tools, because there are tools, and your knowledge is also a tool at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, and then you have to work, and you need to make your investment work. So obviously you can hire people. And then again, if you hire people, you need to train them because it's totally useless to have a fantastic computer and jewelry software if you or your people don't know how to use it. Okay, and from there, you need to work to make more money, and more money. So it means that you need to be a good designer, have great ideas to create new jewels. Okay, and designing, that's the pretty glamorous part. And then you need to manufacture the jewels. Okay, so obviously then you need to invest in a place to manufacture. Then you need machines. And in jewelry, you need a lot of expensive machines to be productive. to be competitive. Then you still might need people because AI and robots have yet not replaced everybody. And you need to manufacture high quality, competitively priced jewels and have a market. You can sell on the internet, you can sell in shops. So then you need to invest in shops, create a brand, create your brand image, invest, 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 spend more money, spend more money, spend more money. And that's how business works. Okay, so that's great. And here I have mostly spoken of you are creating your own jewelry business, jewelry design, jewelry manufacturing. Generally, that's when you have money to invest to begin with. So let's say that's the perfect situation. You have money to invest, you have time to learn, you're a curious person, you are an entrepreneur, you want to do something with your life, you're ambitious. Okay, but most people want to learn to design jewelry because they have no money at all. They spent their last dime buying a laptop computer. So they have no money left at all to buy a license. And some softwares have student licenses, but most of the student licenses are not free. And some softwares do have school and student licenses for free, but that means that you need to be studying at a school to get a student free license. And yet again, most people don't have money to study in a jewelry school. So now, who am I to speak? Well, I was the founder and director and teacher during 17 years, a jewelry school here in Mexico City. I was software representative here in Mexico for 12 years and also expert instructor. All these dynamics about studying, working, costs, jewelry manufacturing, jewelry design, jewelry schools, and mostly the entire panorama of the jewelry business. So I'm talking about experience and experience with a lot of young students who had just and barely the money to begin studying and buying some tools and doing their first steps in the jewelry business. So, what happens in real life? Rhino, the 3D software, is one of the most pirated software in software history. And the parent company knows that. So actually, Rhino became famous because the company that owns Rhino decided very early on to place their software in as many schools as possible. Anything remotely related to design as an institution would get a contact and very often a visit from a Rhino representative, and they placed their software everywhere. So the schools, they had educational licenses and the students had student licenses. So the costs were very low, very attractive. But nonetheless, because life is life, many people couldn't really pay for their license, and so started the piracy problem of Rhino. And actually, that's how it became one industry software in many fields, not just in jewelry. So around that, despite of the piracy, one of the huge advantages for the company making Rhino was that everybody talked about Rhino and everybody was using Rhino and it was done. And that was much the same for what was called Rhino Gold. So nowadays, you need to know that Rhino Gold doesn't exist anymore. It has been replaced by Rhino Artisan and Matrix Gold. And all the older versions are considered deprecated. So obviously, that's part of the company to fight against piracy, to have more control over the markets, and also more control about training. Because the second benefit of not fighting much against piracy was that they were making a lot of money training people. even if they had a pirated license. So, when that's a lot of money, that outweighs the motivation of fighting against piracy. You see, there's an entire dynamic, so much that I have never met somebody who has paid for a Rhino license. And you will very rarely see any consequence from using a pirated software. But let me remind to anybody using pirated softwares out there, even for learning, and that's also a topic that's very important. Many people consider that using pirated software when you're learning, it's like fair usage. But the thing is that fair usage doesn't exist for software licenses. If you're studying, you should have a student license and a paid one, yes, not a pirated student license. So that's a big topic, because many people think that education should be free and completely free, and the tools to learn should also be free, accessible. Okay? So these are concepts, these are ideas, but in real life, well, student licenses, they have a cost, and well, many people use pirated software for learning purposes because their goal is to learn to become the best at using a specific software in a specific field, like Rhino Gold, Matrix Gold, Blender, 3 Design CAD, SolidWorks, ArtCam, FreeCAD, Cinema 4D, CrossGems, Fusion, Plasticity, 3D Studio Max, Maya, Houdini, ZBrush, and many that I forget. There are many softwares that you can use to make jewelry. And well, the goal of many people is to learn and to get a job. And their goal is to get a job and start making money so that at their job, generally, the company will provide a paid license software. Of course. And actually, the cost of many softwares is marketed towards the industry. Most software that cost $8,000, $10,000, $20,000, or even more, by example, are not really marketed for individual jewelers or individual jewelry designers. No, the goal at that price is that companies buy the softwares, 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or sometimes 20 licenses for their design department. That's the logic. So generally, one individual jeweler, jewelry designer is not the real target of these softwares. But over the years, we have seen individual entrepreneurs in the jewelry business buy specific licenses at that price range or even more. Okay? But mostly young people, they want to learn, they get a pirated software, they start learning, they send their portfolio, they search, and yeah, obviously the dream is real. They get a job, and finally they think they're going to work with legitimate paid licenses. But believe me, I've seen way too many people in way too many businesses use pirated software. And yes, I've also seen businesses get terminated because of software licenses issues. And when I say terminated, I say completely terminated because obviously they lost the lawsuits and they could not pay the fines to cover for the losses of using pirated, unlegitimate licenses. Okay? So there are consequences of using pirated software. And even if you're learning, you should avoid using pirated software. So I'm not your granddad, I'm not your dad, I'm not your friend, I'm not your teacher. Well, in fact, I'm all of that, if you will. Even so, it's not a recommendation, an advice, an order, or any kind of wisdom. The same problems as you had when I was young. And I was a teacher, I was a designer, and I was a school owner and director. So I had that problem at many levels. So, ethically speaking, and ethics do matter, you have the obligation of finding a way, a legal way, an ethical way, so that the softwares you're using professionally are a legitimate license. And you need to pay the price because that's the concept. There is nothing without nothing. And sometimes the price is not money, sometimes it's ethics, moral values, behavior, ideas. And that's how ideas make money. If you want to learn, you need a student license, pay for it, or you need to find a free legal software that will let you learn and train the skills that you want to have to find a job and make proper money. So, obviously, the dynamic there is that many people will tell you that paying for legitimate software, legitimate training, legitimate business is a waste of time and money. Well, I will not change the world. I'm just talking about how things work. So now, you also need to take into account the learning curve times. And yes, here you need to know that most expensive softwares have very short, very fast learning times. And that's because the logic of the software, the time they've spent creating these softwares, really shows when you're using the softwares. The tools are indeed very efficient, very fast, and they're very easy to use. So well that some softwares have a main training time of 40 hours. And I'm not selling any software here anymore. Okay, so 40 hours, that's great. That's really fast. And that's one of the main differences with Blender, by example. They might think I'm a Blender fanboy, but that's not correct. I have a lot of history before coming to using Blender and teaching Blender, do what some people think I'm absolutely not capable of doing, and giving correct professional advice. Talking professionally about Blender and other jewelry softwares. So that's one of the main problems using Blender. Blender is capable of many, many, many things. Sometimes more capable than very, very, very expensive softwares. But the learning times for Blender are generally a lot longer because you need to learn and master many aspects of Blender to become as fast and efficient, well, let's say as me, by example, in Blender. So the sooner you start, I guess, the better. Actually, when I started as an apprentice with my master jeweler, he wasn't doing any 3D. He was doing two-dimensional jewelry designs using Adobe Illustrator. And I talked to him about designing in 3D, and I made some 3D jewelry designs and models in 2001, and I was using 3D Studio Max. Okay, for several years, I used and taught 3D Studio Max, and 3D printing was barely starting to be something. You can consider that basically only NASA had the technology to make 3D printing. So, the learning times. Blender is going to require more effort on the learning side because you'll have to learn more. So, here, my advice is that it depends who you are. If you really are in a hurry to get a job, you basically have two options. You can learn Rhino, Rhino Gold, Matrix, Matrix Gold, and learn it quickly and find a job. Now, here, generally, your job will be a low paying job, but it will be a good job because many, many, many people know how to use Rhino, and because that's the industry software, and everybody is very good at using Rhino, Rhino Gold, Matrix, Matrix Gold. So that makes that the job market it's generally a low paying job market. That's how it's done. Many people know how to do something. If you know how to do it too, well, good for you. But many other people can replace you and do even better than you for less money. So, one of the benefits of using an industry standard software, yes, it will be very easy to find a job. And then it won't be paid much. That's the bad side of using an industry standard software. So, most of the time when learning these softwares, it's really quick. Training can be very expensive, and also having a legal license can be pretty expensive. So, if it doesn't work, it was quick to learn, but you used a lot of money. And you could even say you've wasted a lot of money, especially in the end if you don't like the low paying job or you don't even find a job because, well, depending the times, you won't find a job. Okay, but then let's say you learn Blender. So there, that the good side of Blender, well, it's that it's a free open source software. So you can always legally learn Blender. You won't have a license problem. And high quality professional free training is generally easier to find for Blender. And by example, on my channel, the 3D jewelry design and modeling and rendering tutorials. So it means that you're going to invest more time learning Blender, but you will learn more skills. So then, obviously, you'll face exactly the same problems as people who learn industry standard softwares like Rhino Gold Matrix, Matrix Gold, because nowadays millions of people know and use Blender for anything. Movies, video games, 3D printing, jewelry design, automotive design, architectural design, etc., etc. So you will also get a low paying job if you get any job. But at least you will have done so using a legal software. So that's better for your ethics and moral values. After all the process, even if you did not like the low paying job you got learning Blender, you still have some moral value. So, here, part of my answer is that you should learn all the softwares that you can learn. But also remember that the time that it takes, the money, the costs, and the ethical issues that you can face when learning any software, the process has consequences. So maybe if it fails, the process can fail differently. And that is important. If you learn Matrix or any very specialized software, yes, you can find better paying jobs. Learning is faster, but to learn legally and have a legal license costs a lot more. And if it fails, all that you've invested is going to be wasted mostly. And like the person who asked the question already said, if you learn Blender, you'll have used more time learning many aspects of the 3D business, more skills, and you can also find very well paid jobs using Blender. And also because there's a very interesting aspect in practice. Some companies would like to use Blender, but they don't know how. And knowing that Blender is free, it doesn't require a specific huge investment for the company. If they want to hire you, you can always say, you know what? Blender is a great solution. It's legally free. Let me show you how it's done. So you can even start a new trend in the company that's going to hire you by introducing Blender in that specific company and get a very well paid job as well. So that's an aspect that really does exist on the Blender side. But a problem that you can face is that many companies want to use a very specialized software like Matrix, 3Design, or ArtCam, by example, because the file format is compatible between all their designers. So they don't want to switch to Blender and have the problem of file format compatibility inside the company. And that's a fact. Also, if you only know how to use Blender and you're searching for a job and they specifically want somebody using Matrix, you won't be able to introduce Blender ever. They're not interested. And you need to understand it's logical. They want to be using the same software across their entire company. And they're right most of the time. So my advice is that you learn as many softwares as you can. And that's why I explain part of my, let's say, biography, because I did not start using Blender and only Blender. That came decades after I started making jewelry and 3D jewelry design. I had to find a way as an institution, as a responsible teacher, to find a professional solution to make 3D jewelry possible for as many people as possible. And Blender was the perfect answer.